Hello everyone, welcome back to Music Chat. We're going to take a little journey back in time today and talk about spirituals. And we're doing this in part because we just talked about Dvorak's New World Symphony and the famous tune Going Home that became famous from that. And we have chosen a song called Follow the Drinking Gourd. It might not be a song you know, but for some of you maybe it is. But it has a lot of history and it tells a great story, and it really is a great example of how spirituals were used for different reasons. And Barbara's going to tell us a little bit about how spirituals were used in different scenarios in the time of the enslaved people.
Right, and a lot of people perhaps don't know that spirituals were songs of the enslaved African Americans in our country, and they were first called just slave songs. And as the enslaved people were taught about Christianity, they began to sing songs that were more about praise and about faith and so forth, and they became spirituals, so African American spirituals.
So an example of that would be something like
Were You There is one that we sing all the time, and Let Us Break Bread Together is another one. I'm going to tell you that they're some of my favorite things to sing.
I know, that's why Barbara's going to do a lot of the talking today.
Well,
She's sung a lot of spirituals and taught a lot of spirituals.
Well, I think one of the things that's so special about them is that they're so honest.
Mm-hmm.
And they come from a people who were displaced. They come from a people who were suffering a lot and suffering, and I believe that they were able to use them to express a lot of their feelings and kind of uphold their faith. They were also used as work songs, and in every culture we have work songs.
Mm-hmm.
I even do it, when I'm cleaning the house, you want something that kind of helps you pass the time or keeps you going. And the slave owners loved to have them sing work songs because it meant that they were working together and they would use the beat to help them do certain tasks and whatever. So I think probably what happened is that the slave owners kind of forgot about the fact they were singing, and so as a result of that, the enslaved people used them to send messages to each other, which I think is pretty awesome. First of all, you have to remember that back in the 1800s to 1700s, it was illegal to teach a slave how to read, which is so sad to me.
Right.
But the slave that would be the one that would take the plantation owners to church, well, he'd sit out there on his buggy and the windows would be open in the church and he would hear all those stories and go back and relay those stories to the people around him. And sometimes they became songs, sometimes just stories. It's an oral tradition, and that's why we really don't have definite facts about it. There were some publications late in the 1800s that quoted people like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and how they used their songs to send codes and messages. So we know that actually it did happen, but nobody is really definite. The musicologists are not real definite about exactly what each one meant, because they've been kind of morphed and changed over the years.
Well, with any oral tradition, words change, notes change, and that's just part of what an oral tradition is.
Exactly. So when you think about spirituals, first of all, they started out as slave songs and then became spirituals once the religion part of it came. And then there were work songs, lots of work songs, and then there were Underground Railroad songs. And those are the ones that we're kind of talking about today with this particular song, because they were the ones that conveyed messages. And again, they were out in the fields maybe singing, or they were walking from place to place. They were singing these songs and they were probably just kind of ignored, and the people that were keeping watch over them probably had no idea that they were giving each other messages about how to escape and who was going to be there and so forth.
Right.
The one that we're going to talk about today is a standard spiritual that is taught in schools to kind of show a picture of what that whole thing was like, what the Underground Railroad could have been like. Now, this song's lyrics also were changed lots of times.
Right.
And the first time somebody figured or heard it was maybe like in 1920 something or other, and
I think that's when it was first attempted to be published.
that's right.
Yeah.
And it was told to this person by a black gentleman, or three different black
Yeah,
gentlemen.
there was the guy, it's significant enough that there's articles about him. His name was H.B. Parks. And I've learned a lot about how songs are, they call it how songs are collected before they are published. And songs like this that have like histories about them. And so, there were lots of southern states involved, and he was able to find examples from the oral tradition by talking to everybody in the whole state. Probably.
I know.
He just went around and kept talking to people, tell me about this song, or, he would talk to musicians and people who were likely to maybe have a piece of the past, older people, and so in the 1920s, if you were talking to someone older, they knew that time period better, and so, but they weren't able to find it in all of the states that were in the Underground Railroad, but they did find it in 3, so, we don't really know, all the history about it.
No, but just little bits and pieces was that first thing, and then someone else took that, and Lomax also was a musicologist that went around, and he was an authority on American folk music, and he went around and collected lots of samples. And
I guess there are people that study folk. That's what they do. They're historians, but they hone in on folk music and folklore.
He is an authority. He was an authority on that, and this was in the middle of the 20th century. So then the lyrics that we know most today are the ones by Hayes, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Hayes, and he was he kind of took what had been discovered by Parks, the first guy, and what was discovered by Lomax, and he wrote these lyrics that were eventually published and used by the Weavers. Now, I'm old enough to know who the Weavers were. You said you never heard of them before.
Where you're going with this, during the Civil Rights Movement, that's when all these folk singers in America got interested in this.
In the 60s, late 50s, 60s.
And I recognized Pete Seeger, that was the only one I recognized.
Well, and there's the other person, Sparks, Randy Sparks, I think, was the one that started the Christie Minstrels. So, again, I remember those times. I had my guitar out playing all those songs. And it was sung by the Weavers, and his lyrics have kind of stuck. But there are lots of different versions of it.
Well, we were talking before we started the chat about an example, just the simplest example of how a lyric could change or be modernized, really is a better word sometimes. The word follow that we use when we sing Follow the Drinking Gourd was faller. And so if you could just imagine going down the whole lyric and kind of imagining how those changes could take place.
And that brings up another point, just like the Gullah people outside of the Carolinas created their language, I think when the enslaved people were singing some of these songs, they were in their dialect, in their vernacular.
Yeah,
so I think the slave owners,
their accents.
They didn't
dialect.
They didn't really understand them. So again, that was another great thing for them because they could sing a lot of things in code and not, you know.
Nobody was paying any
Yeah.
attention.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about the codes and the things that go on in this song.
Well, why don't you sing the refrain?
Okay, I'll do my best. And if you want to sing along,
Does it start with the refrain
Yes.
typically?
I've always started
Yeah,
with the refrain.
uh-huh.
Yeah. So follow the drinking gourd, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is awaiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. So let's just talk about that. That's the refrain. That's, you know, what everybody would come in singing, and then they would add verses to it. And so the drinking gourd, for all outward purposes, it's whatever they would use to get their water out of the bucket, and it was a gourd that they would hollow out, and it would look like a ladle. But it actually is referring to the North Star. And it's telling them to follow the North Star, the Big Dipper, because the North Star is at some point of the Big Dipper. I'm not an astronomer. And if they do that, then they'll be heading north, and they're in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't want to be quoted on this.
Please don't quote us on anything.
I'm not an astronomer either, but one of the maps I saw in reading had a picture of the Big Dipper, and the outside two stars always point to the North Star.
Right.
Yeah, so you can, if you find the Big Dipper and you go to those two stars on the outside of the
Polaris or
gourd,
whatever, yeah.
then you can find it. You know, you just look down and you'll see the bright Polaris.
And I venture to say that our wonderful editor will probably put that up on the screen. I'm talking about
Or correct me if
Or
I'm
correct
wrong.
you.
Yes.
No, I think you're right about that. And so from the refrain, first of all, it told everybody, well, this is our song that's going to, you know, tell you how to get out of here. And to follow the North Star, and the old man is awaiting for to carry you to freedom. Well, there's lots of discussion as to whether there actually was this person, but
well, there's more about him specifically
yeah.
in the verses.
But essentially it was, you know, follow the North Star. You're going to look for someone who's going to find, and he's going to take you to freedom. So yeah. So then we have to figure out when we're supposed to do this, right?
Yes.
So the next part is about when you're supposed to follow the drinking gourd. So this verse goes like this. When the sun comes up and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom if you follow the drinking gourd. All right, so we have two clues here. When the sun comes up and the first quail calls. And pretty straightforward actually, but tell them a little bit more about when that is.
It's when the sun comes back is going to refer to either winter or spring. And the days are getting longer and the angle of the sun is higher each day at noon. And the first quail refers to the breeding season. Quail in Alabama start calling to each other in early to mid-April. So the big message is the best time to travel is going to be late winter, spring.
Early spring.
Yeah, and I read somewhere too that the foliage, of course, would be less, and you can see the clues, like the trees that are marked and things would have been easier to see, rather than when summer when everything's so dense.
Yeah. And the day is still short to a certain extent, but not
They're
long.
starting to get
starting to get longer.
Right.
Plus, you know, somebody said, I read that they thought that when the sun comes back meant that it was supposed to be in the winter time. And then because the rivers would be frozen over, it'd be easier.
That's
but if
true
you think
too,
about
right.
picture an enslaved person in your mind, and they don't have a lot of clothing to put on themselves to make that trip.
Boy, yeah.
It would have been
It's hard to
treacherous.
imagine.
So I really
Yeah.
believe, I prefer the interpretation that it was at the beginning of spring when the first quail calls and you know, the breeding
Seems
season.
to,
Yeah.
seems to point that way for sure.
Yeah. So the second verse, so we know when to go, and now it's like, okay, how do we know where to go? And this is what it says on that. When the riverbank, now the riverbank will make a mighty good road. Dead trees will show you the way, and the left foot, peg foot, traveling on. Just you follow the drinking gourd. This one to me is just fascinating.
This
I love
has
this
a
one.
lot of information
Yeah.
and a few little lines.
Well, first of all, you're going to follow the river, which makes sense. But talk about the left foot, peg foot.
Well, in the river they're talking about is called the Tombigbee. It empties into Mobile Bay, Alabama. It's the whole thing's describing how to follow the route from Mobile, Alabama to going north. And and then its headwaters extend in the northeastern into Mississippi. And so the dead trees will show you the way. According to Parks, the editor, the first editor, Peg Leg Joe was the name of the old man that was supposedly the one that was marking the trees and such. He marked trees and other landmarks with charcoal or mud of the outline of a human left foot and a round spot in place of the right foot. So it was a foot and a spot.
Peg leg.
Yeah, so yeah. And there was something else about, let me see if I can find that other sheet. I don't know, did I lay it?
So they would follow the dead trees, and they would also follow the marks on.
Right.
Follow the riverbank, and the dead trees will show them a way, and the mark on the trees would show them that they were. That just showed them the way. It wasn't like a safe house or anything like that.
Yeah, just the other thing here, the old man is slang for captain.
That's right.
And it's just believed that this Peg Leg Joe had served in the Navy. But he also, in some of the reading, he apparently would, if he's even real, we don't even know if he's real, but the story goes that he would get employment on the plantations. He would seek employment, like he was a journeyman, he could fix things, and so he would get hired onto the plantations, and then he would talk to people as he could, and they would sometimes sing and you know, and undercover kind of thing, and he would explain the code, you know, so that's all part of how this supposedly worked.
And you know, as I looked more into this, and I'm sure you did too, it kind of morphed from being historical to being folklore. You know, and so we had a discussion whether it was worth even explaining if it's folklore, but I think it is, because some of it is true. And that's what folklore is. It's taken some facts and creating a story that it adapts to whatever your needs are at the time, kind of, sort of. But I know in teaching this to a lot of my fourth graders, it did allow them to have something that they could have inside, which was this melody, which was very easy to remember, that would remind them of the plight of these people, I think. And
well, we do know that the coding, there was
absolutely there.
Underground Railroad, there was code.
Absolutely.
And so this helps you imagine, you know, whether it's completely factual or not.
How they did it.
You know, and that part's true.
It's absolutely
true. If the
true.
details aren't quite true, they might have been true over here in this other song, you know, so it's almost like you put history together and you kind of apply it to this situation with these lyrics and things, and this certainly could have been exactly what it is. And somebody wrote about, you know, is it a clever fabrication of facts and things, and they said, well, you know, the best reason to believe it is because it's a clever, it's a clever, and history is very clever all the time.
Absolutely, yeah, I know. And the quote by Harriet Tubman too, the fact that she was alive when this history of this biography of her was written, and she said that she used Go Down Moses all the time as a code song. And Frederick Douglass, who said he sang them. So it definitely gives it validity, and we know that it happened. This one to me is one that teaches that idea really well.
Right.
So I think it's valuable in that regard. But and speaking of Harriet Tubman, I will just give a plug for the movie about her. It's called Harriet. It's a recent movie, and that is an excellent movie to let you experience some of the things that happened with the Underground Railroad, and with her, it's really excellent. So we are, you know, we're just kind of scratching the surface of what was happening then. But I'm always encouraged by the fact that there were so many abolitionists really at that time who were really trying to help the enslaved people and abolish slavery.
And went to great risk.
Risk, that's right. And it was a money thing, so, you know, that's hard, but I'm always impressed to find out that there were so many people that were helping them. So this is a very cool song. Shall we sing it all the way through?
I was going to say we can real quickly. The verse 3 goes. It talks about the river ends between two hills, and it's talking about the headwaters of the Tombigbee River and the Woodall Mountain, the high point in Mississippi, as being reference points on a map that were recognizable in a larger sense. And there's another river on the other side, and that's the verse, and that refers to, on the river on the other side of the hills is the Tennessee, which extends outward in an arc above Woodall Mountain, and goes on to say that it proceeds virtually due north to the Ohio River border with Illinois. So now we're getting close to freedom, you know, and I was saying, I don't know how they got across that big Ohio River, but Barbara says you'll see
Watch that movie.
That's
amazing.
So, you know, having to navigate rivers and woods and weather and, you know, crossing the rivers and all this, and trying not to get caught, and just amazing.
Amazing.
And then verse 4 talks about when the great big river meets the little river, that we're talking about the Tennessee and Ohio again. The rivers come together in Paducah, Kentucky. Apparently do you remember that at all from the movie? Apparently Paducah was, you know, a significant spot.
Not specifically, no.
That was one of the last places before you would cross, I think. And then that's it. You know, so it talks about what we were saying earlier. These spirituals, the codes told people who understood it, that it told them when to leave, where to travel, how far to go on each part of the journey. And each lyric had that specific meaning, you know, to give specific instructions.
I know. So
but always heading north with that North Star.
I know.
But I did also learn that many times they didn't go north. They went west, they went to Mexico, they went
south
to the Caribbean,
to the islands.
So, you know, it was tough to go north.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that the people that were out there looking for escaped slaves knew those routes very well, so they had to really try to be pretty stealthy in getting from one place to the other. So hard times.
So do you want to sing the whole thing?
I
or
think we
we just
should.
link it? Okay, all right.
I think we should, and y'all can, come in they
Okay.
probably had some kind of thing going on here,
Yeah.
And because they didn't really use many instruments, so it might have been usually it was body percussion of some sort. Don't you
Right.
agree, Melanie? I mean, it was just body percussion.
Well, if your hands are working, you're probably just
Yeah, or singing or
clapping, maybe.
clapping
Yeah,
or whatever,
right.
maybe stomping, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's sing this map, shall we? Follow the drinking gourd, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. When the sun comes up and the first quail calls, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd. Well, the riverbank will make a mighty good road. Dead trees will show you the way, and the left foot, pig foot, traveling on. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd. Follow the drinking gourd, where the old man is a-waiting for to carry you to freedom. Follow the drinking gourd.
Inviting song to sing though. It's a great little song.
Mhm.
Very,
Yep.
pentatonic.
Well,
Yes.
and I won't go into this very much today,
Right.
but in a lot of the African tradition is very much that way.
Mhm.
And
That's why
so,
we love those songs
and
so
those
much.
call and
Yeah.
response, and I think that's why we just embrace them so much. And again, for them to bring that tradition here and give us this wealth of music is
Right,
just amazing.
yeah.
I know I've been to a lot of choral concerts, and man, usually it's the last thing everybody sings because it is the most exciting.
Mhm.
Not that song specifically,
Right.
but it's spiritual of some sort.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't know, I'm glad we're talking about it. I don't think we finished. I think we'll probably end up talking about a few more spirituals.
Well, I think we will, because they just offer so much rich history, and it's just makes our job easier just to have a chat about it. So,
It's fun for me. I love it.
so anyway, we'll see you next time on the Music Chat.
Bye.